So good, so good, so good.
New fall arrivals are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. Get ready to save big with up to 60% off brands like Vince, Steve Madden, Kate Spade New York, and Boss. Stock up on the latest trends like animal print, lace, and suede. Join the Nordy Club for free to unlock exclusive discounts, shop clearance, and new arrivals before anyone else, and so much more. Plus, you can buy online and then pick up your order at your favorite Rack store. It's fast and free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
This episode is brought to you by PayPal. You had plans for the last days of summer. And back-to-school shopping has its own plans. School supplies, dorm essentials, your list doesn't stop. Neither does the spending. But when you pay in full with PayPal, you can pay over time. No interest, no fees. Check out with PayPal and get back to summer. Subject to approval. Learn more at paypal.com/payinfor. PayPal Inc. NMLS 910457.
Hello and welcome to the program UFO Warning. In this episode, we're talking about Estonia UFO metamaterial. That's correct, Estonia UFO metamaterial. This is a story that's kind of broken out. It's been around for a while, but it's getting some new traction. Fact is, there are UFO cases involving lights in the sky, and there are cases involving radar tracks, and there are cases involving military pilots who claim they encountered objects that they couldn't identify, and then there are cases that potentially leave something behind. Physical evidence, metal fragments, stuff we call metamaterial. These are objects that can supposedly be placed under a microscope, analyzed in a laboratory, and subjected to the same scientific scrutiny as anything else found on Earth. Now, this brings us to one of the strangest stories to emerge from the former Soviet Union, because according to recent reporting, Russian scientists allegedly analyzed metal recovered from a mysterious object associated with a UFO case in Estonia, and the results reportedly suggested that the material did not possess the isotopic ratios normally expected of metals originating on Earth. Now, if true, that would be an extraordinary claim. But there is a problem. We don't have the complete scientific documentation needed to independently verify it, at least not yet. And that distinction is very important. In this episode, we're going to examine what is actually known about the story. We're going to travel back to Soviet-era Estonia, where a mysterious underground object reportedly triggered a massive investigation. We'll look at the infamous object known as Object M, and we'll examine claims that the KGB and Soviet military became involved. We'll travel into Russia's remote Ural Mountains, where strange microscopic metallic spirals have been reported for decades. And finally, we'll look at what modern science has actually discovered when scientists have subjected alleged UFO metal to serious laboratory analysis. Because if we're going to establish that something genuinely is non-human and that it's reached Earth, this is the kind of evidence that could potentially matter. So let's begin in Estonia. In the 1960s, Estonia was part of the Soviet Union, and according to the accounts surrounding this case, something very strange happened in the Tallinn area. A homeowner was reportedly having a well dug on his property. Nothing unusual about that, until the workers encountered something underground. Something hard and something metallic. According to later accounts, the workers were unable to simply dig through it. The discovery reportedly attracted the attention of Soviet authorities, and what happened next is where this story becomes extraordinary. Instead of simply removing a piece of buried metal and identifying it, Soviet authorities allegedly began a much larger investigation. The area was excavated. A tunnel was reportedly constructed, and investigators attempted to reach the mysterious object underground. The object eventually became known as Object M, and according to accounts repeated by UFO researchers and journalist Ross Coulthart, the investigation was serious enough to involve Soviet military personnel and other authorities. Coulthart has said that the incident was documented in Soviet intelligence files and that the case remained a subject of speculation in Estonia both before and after the collapse of the Soviet Union. He also recently visited the location himself. According to Coulthard, witnesses described a major excavation operation. The entire garden was reportedly dug up, a tunnel was constructed toward the mysterious object, and then came one of the strangest details in the story. A worker allegedly struck the object with a pickaxe, and according to the account, the worker was thrown backward. Now, this is where we need to slow down a little bit, because this is a fascinating claim, but it remains a claim. We do not have publicly available video of the event, and we do not have the object itself, and we don't have the complete Soviet investigation file publicly available for independent examination. So while the story is fascinating, we shouldn't confuse the existence of the story with proof of an extraterrestrial object. But there is another reason Object M is so interesting. The object was reportedly never recovered. Think about that. In most UFO crash retrieval stories, the alleged craft or debris disappears. It's supposedly taken away, it's supposedly hidden, it's supposedly destroyed, or the witness dies before anyone can verify the story. Object M is different. According to the reports, the mysterious metal may still be in the ground, and if that is true, the case is potentially testable. Now, the second part of the story is the Soviet Union connection. Ross Coulthard has emphasized another aspect of the story. The Soviet Union apparently took UFO reports seriously. According to Coulthard, Soviet authorities investigated thousands of UFO cases during the Cold War. That shouldn't necessarily surprise us. The Soviet military had obvious reasons to investigate unidentified objects. During the Cold War, something unidentified in Soviet airspace could potentially have been an American aircraft. It could be a spy platform, missiles, reconnaissance device, or some other form of military technology. So, Soviet interest in UFOs doesn't automatically mean Soviet belief in extraterrestrial spacecraft, but it does establish something important. The Soviet Union was interested in unexplained aerial phenomena, and in a highly secretive state, investigations could disappear into classified archives. That creates fertile ground for stories like Object M, because when investigators supposedly arrive, dig up property, and then leave without publicly explaining what they found, the unanswered questions can survive for generations, and that's exactly what appears to have happened here. Now, part 3, what was actually found? Now, we reach the most important question, what exactly was this object made of? And that is where the current story gets much more interesting. Recent reports claim that Russian scientists analyzed metal associated with the alleged UFO case, and Ross Coulthard has reportedly said that the metals showed isotopic ratios that were not normal for comparable metals found on Earth. If accurately reported, that would be significant, very significant, because an isotope is simply a different version of an element with a different number of neutrons. Take magnesium or iron or lead. The chemical identity remains the same, but the relative proportions or different isotopes can provide clues about where that material originated. Scientists use isotopic measurements in everything from geology to planetary science, and that means isotope analysis can potentially tell us something about the history of a material. If an alleged extraterrestrial artifact possessed a truly unusual isotopic signature, researchers would want to know why. But here's the critical issue. An unusual isotope ratio is not automatically proof of extraterrestrial origin. There are terrestrial processes capable of altering isotope ratios. Manufacturing processes can fractionate isotopes, and chemical processes can do it. Nuclear processes can also do it. And contamination can complicate measurements. So the real question isn't simply, are the isotopes unusual? The question is, are they unusual in a way that cannot reasonably be produced on Earth? And that is a much higher scientific standard. And as of now, we need the complete laboratory documentation before we can answer that question confidently. There's another bizarre story involving strange metal objects. This one dates back to the early 1990s.
This episode is brought to you by Nordstrom. For 125 years, Nordstrom has been part of your story. The stylist who found the perfect outfit for your big interview. The first pair of walking shoes for your 1-year-old. The tomato soup you shared with your sister at the cafe. These are the moments that make Nordstrom, Nordstrom. Big or small, we're here for all of it. Celebrating 125 years with new moments still ahead. Discover it all in Nordstrom stores and at Nordstrom.com.
This episode is brought to you by PayPal. You had plans for the last days of summer. And back-to-school shopping has its own plans. School supplies, dorm essentials, your list doesn't stop. Neither does the spending. But when you pay in full with PayPal, you can pay over time. No interest, no fees. Check out with PayPal and get back to summer. Subject to approval. Learn more at paypal.com/payinfor. PayPal Inc. NMLS 910457.
Between approximately 1991 and 1993, prospectors working near rivers in the Ural region reportedly discovered unusual metallic objects. Among the locations associated with the reports are the Narada, Kozum, and Belbenu rivers, and the objects were bizarre. Many were described as tiny spirals. Some were much larger. Others were microscopic. According to accounts that have circulated for decades, thousands of these objects were found, and their reported composition was equally unusual. The larger objects were described as containing copper. The smaller ones were reportedly composed largely of tungsten and molybdenum. Tungsten is an extremely dense metal with an extraordinarily high melting point. Molybdenum is also extremely heat resistant and has important applications in high-temperature industrial environments. That naturally raised eyebrows, because if these objects really were ancient, microscopic, manufactured structures, their existence would raise enormous questions. Were they natural formations? Were they industrial debris? Were they modern objects transported into ancient geological layers? Or were they artifacts from some unknown human technology? Or, as some UFO researchers have proposed, could they represent evidence of an ancient technological civilization? Or even extraterrestrial visitors? Those are the possibilities that have kept the story alive. And then there's the ancient nanotechnology claim. Some versions of the Ural Mountains story go much further. They claim that the objects were extremely old. Some reports have assigned ages ranging from roughly 20,000 years to hundreds of thousands of years. And that is where the phrase ancient nanotechnology entered the discussion. Imagine finding a microscopic manufactured object inside geological material that predates known human technology. That would be extraordinary. But there is a major problem. Dating the surrounding material is not necessarily the same thing as dating the object itself. This is a crucial distinction. If you find a modern object in ancient sediment, the sediment's age doesn't automatically tell you when the object was manufactured. Objects can move. Sediments can be disturbed, and mining operations can introduce contamination, and material can be transported from one geological layer to another. Therefore, to establish that these metallic spheres were genuinely ancient technological artifacts, scientists would need extremely strong evidence showing both the age and provenance of the objects. And that is precisely where many versions of the Ural Mountains story become difficult to independently verify. There are photographs and there are reports. There are even claims of laboratory examinations, but there isn't a universally accepted body of peer-reviewed evidence establishing that these objects are extraterrestrial technology. That doesn't make them uninteresting. It means the extraordinary interpretation remains unproven. We have to ask ourselves why the Ural objects matter to the current story. Well, why bring up the Ural Mountains when we're talking about Object M in Estonia, you might ask? Because the same general theme keeps appearing. The former Soviet Union contains a long history of unusual reports involving physical materials. And some UFO researchers have argued that Russian authorities were interested in recovering and studying anomalous technology. Ross Coulthart has previously discussed claims that Russia possesses recovered UFO material and has suggested that reverse engineering efforts may have occurred somewhere in the Ural region. Those claims remain allegations, but the Ural Mountains have become almost legendary within UFO research. It's an enormous remote region that contains extensive mineral resources. It was strategically important during the Soviet period, and it has long been associated with stories of strange discoveries. That combination makes it almost perfect territory for UFO mythology, but mythology and evidence are not the same thing. Now, we have to look at the science check on this. I know it's exciting that we're talking about this UFO metamaterial being discovered, but we have to ask ourselves, is that what's really going on here? We may come to perhaps the most important part of this entire story, because there is another UFO metal case where scientists actually did get their hands on the material, and the results provide an important reality check. The material became associated with the 1947 Roswell UFO incident. It eventually came into the possession of Tom DeLonge's organization, To the Stars Academy. Later, the material became part of an investigation by the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO. Scientists at Oak Ridge National Laboratory examined the material, and what they discovered was fascinating, but not extraterrestrial. The material turned out to be a magnesium alloy. Its primary components were magnesium and zinc. It also contained bismuth, lead, and trace elements. Scientists then examined its isotopic signatures, and the results pointed toward Earth. The magnesium isotopes were consistent with terrestrial material. The lead isotopes were also consistent with material originating on Earth. Researchers also examined the material's microscopic structure. Again, it looked like something manufactured here. The material did possess unusual characteristics, but unusual does not mean extraterrestrial, and this is exactly why laboratory analysis is so important. The question isn't whether something looks strange. The question is whether nature and human technology can explain it. In this particular case, scientists concluded that the material had been manufactured terrestrially. Popular Mechanics reported that Oak Ridge researchers had high confidence that the evidence indicated the material was made on Earth, although using an unusual mixture of elements. The proposed explanation is that the alloy may have originated from experimental magnesium alloy research during the post-World War II period. So one supposed piece of alien metal ultimately pointed back toward Earth. Now, the difference between the Roswell sample and Object M, this brings us back to Estonia, because there is an important distinction. The Roswell associated sample has actually undergone modern scientific analysis. Object M is different. We still don't have the complete object. We don't have publicly accessible laboratory documentation establishing exactly what the material is, and we don't have the object itself sitting inside a laboratory today. That makes Object M simultaneously fascinating and frustrating, because if the object really remains underground, we potentially have something rare in UFO research, a testable mystery. Imagine conducting a modern ground-penetrating radar survey of the property. If a large metallic structure were detected several feet underground, that would dramatically increase the significance of the story. Then imagine actually excavating it. If researchers recovered a large metallic object, it could be photographed, it could be measured, scanned, sectioned, its metallurgy could be examined, its isotopic composition could be determined, its manufacturing techniques could be analyzed, and its material could be compared with known terrestrial alloys. At that point, we wouldn't need eyewitness testimony, we wouldn't need UFO mythology, and we wouldn't need decades-old rumors. We would have physical evidence. Now, what about the new isotope claim? So let's go back to the headline that has suddenly brought this entire story back into the news. The claim is that Russian scientists determined that some of the recovered metals did not possess normal terrestrial isotopic ratios. And that is potentially extraordinary. But right now, the responsible position is to separate the claim from the evidence. The claim is being reported. Ross Coulthard has publicly discussed it. News Nation has reported it. Other outlets have reported the story. But the scientific community needs more than a television interview. They need the laboratory. They need researchers. They need analytical mythology. And they need the exact isotopic measurements. What they really need is controlled samples and a chain of custody. We need to know exactly where the material came from, and we need independent scientists to reproduce the analysis. Without that information, we can't responsibly conclude that the material is extraterrestrial or that it even exists. But we also shouldn't automatically dismiss it. That's what I think is the interesting middle ground here. The claim is extraordinary. The evidence, at least publicly available right now, remains incomplete. Now here's the bigger question. What would constitute convincing physical evidence of extraterrestrial technology? I mean, would it be an unusual metal? Probably not by itself, because Earth contains an incredible variety of unusual materials. And would it be a strange isotope ratio? That would be more interesting, but even that would require careful analysis. And would it be a manufactured object? Well, now we're getting somewhere, especially if the manufacturing technology could not be reproduced using known human techniques. And what if that object were found in an unmistakably ancient geological layer? That would be extraordinary. But the gold standard would be something even more difficult to explain. An artifact demonstrating a technological principle that humans have never developed. Something that could be independently tested. Something that could be reproduced. Something that could not plausibly have been manufactured using terrestrial technology.
So good, so good, so good.
New fall arrivals are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. Get ready to save big with up to 60% off brands like Vince, Steve Madden, Kate Spade New York, and Boss. Stock up on the latest trends like animal print, lace, and suede. Join the Nordy Club for free to unlock exclusive discounts, shop clearance, and new arrivals before anyone else, and so much more. Plus, you can buy online and then pick up your order at your favorite Rack store. It's fast and free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
This episode is brought to you by PayPal. You had plans for the last days of summer. And back-to-school shopping has its own plans. School supplies, dorm essentials, your list doesn't stop. Neither does the spending. But when you pay in full with PayPal, you can pay over time. No interest, no fees. Check out with PayPal and get back to summer. Subject to approval. Learn more at paypal.com/payinfor. PayPal Inc. NMLS 910457.
That would change the conversation completely. So where does that leave us? Well, we have an alleged Soviet-era underground object in Estonia. We have reports that Soviet authorities conducted a major investigation. We have claims that the object was never recovered. And we have Ross Coulthart saying that Russian intelligence files contain information about the case. We have claims that material associated with the investigation was analyzed, and we now have a sensational allegation that the material possesses unusual isotopic characteristics. Then there are the strange metallic spirals reported from Russia's Ural Mountains, objects described as microscopic, objects composed of metals including tungsten, molybdenum, and copper, objects that have been claimed to be thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years old, and objects that some researchers have interpreted as possible technological artifacts. But there is another side to the story. Modern scientific analysis of another famous alleged UFO metal sample, the Roswell-associated magnesium material, found evidence consistent with terrestrial manufacture. And that is perhaps the most important lesson here. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, but extraordinary claims also deserve to be investigated, not mocked, but not automatically believed. Investigated. If Object M is still buried beneath that property in Estonia, then we may have something that very few UFO cases possess. A mystery that could potentially be solved. A piece of equipment capable of looking underground could tell us whether something is actually there. And if something is there, modern metallurgy could tell us what it is. And that is the part of the story that I find most interesting. Because after decades of UFO stories involving witnesses, photographs, radar reports, and classified documents, imagine finally having the thing itself. Not a blurry photograph or witness description, and not a government memo. The actual object, the metal artifact. Something we can put on the laboratory table and ask one simple question: what are you? And if the answer eventually turns out to be something made by humans, then we've solved a fascinating mystery. But if scientists were ever able to establish that the material was manufactured somewhere other than Earth, and that conclusion survived independent testing, we would be looking at something much bigger. We would no longer be debating whether UFOs are real. We would be debating who made the technology and how it got here. This is UFO Warning. Hope you liked the program. If you did, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe. doesn't cost a dime. Until next time, I'm out of here.